Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bells Must Ring podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Rice, here with my usual co host, Arnav Sarkar. I hope that everybody out there was able to pick up on my enthusiastic tone that I just used to open the podcast because Rutgers has officially hired, or rather, is set to hire, targeting, like all that other, nice stuff,
Right.
whatever it might be. Um, the head coach from South Dakota, Travis Johansen, as its
Mhm.
new defensive coordinator. The search has come to an end, and we have found the Holy Grail.
Let's go. We did it, guys. Like we have a defensive coordinator in staff. We both found out this afternoon. Basically, it was kind of like very frantic and like kind of like the night report obviously had some intel on it. It was
Oh well,
targeting, and they made it
the
official. So like,
first of all, kudos to Richie O'Leary of the Night Report. He essentially broke the news. Like he's,
right,
a great reporter.
right for
Kudos to
yeah
him. But
on the
funny
chat,
and
right? Yeah, and
funny
then
enough,
Alex, he wrote
yeah.
it. He wrote the article, so that's when I think people started getting more wind. And obviously, we're part of a Rutgers group chat. We saw everything, and then eventually Pete Damel, tweeted it out that the move was, they're set to hire him. It was not really, you know what I mean? Like that was like it went from targeting to pretty much gonna happen, right? When Tamil tweeted it, that means it's pretty much
Yeah.
official. So I mean, like
If
yeah,
you guys have ever seen The Office and you know that one clip where it's like, "Oh my god, it's happening.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
happening."
yeah,
That was the private text between me and Arnav as I was at the gym at the time. Arnav was away from his computer. It's just all of a sudden we see the news start to break and we're like, "Oh my god, it's happening." And then everybody starts to rush home. Arnav writes a great article. I start to prep the podcast. It was just a whole
all last minute
chaotic
too. Yeah, yeah. I was like,
chaotic
we gotta
whirlwind
get
of
home. We gotta take care of this. Like,
yeah.
Andrew like took care of the outline for setting up the podcast and everything. So, because we were planning on having a emergency podcast for the DC hire, we obviously didn't know when it was gonna happen. Like, it kind of looked like Greg Schiano was gonna maybe become be the defensive coordinator unless they found someone like out of the blue, like we're
Mhm.
mentioning on yesterday's episode. But yeah, like they managed to come through,
Out of the blue, cannot be more out of the blue.
right?
But
Because like
let's get a
yeah,
little bit
exactly.
into who he is as a coach, who Johansson is as a coach. He brings with him 14 years of experience as a defensive coordinator. Um, he did 7 years of DC experience at FCS South Dakota. He was their head coach last year, but previous he had 7 years of defensive coordinator experience. Um, Johansson was previously the defensive coordinator for NAIA program Grand Valley for 5 years
Hmm.
before he was at FCS South Dakota. I don't really know what NAIA programs mean. To the best of my knowledge, they're not a part of the NCAA, so they're
Yeah,
not in the D1 to D3 range. But
right, right.
experience is experience, no matter where it comes from, essentially. Um, and then he was a defensive coordinator for his alma mater, Concordia St. Paul, a Division II program in Minnesota. As I mentioned before, that is his alma mater. He did play. He was a linebacker for them during his college tenure before, you know, joining their coaching staff and becoming their defensive coordinator. During his time at FCS South Dakota, he coached two Missouri Valley Football Conference Defensive Players of the Year, Brock Morganson in 2023 and, oh Lord, McQueese Grace in 2024. Myqueese Grace. I hope I got that even remotely close to what it's supposed to be. He also coached defensive back Mikey Nunn, who was named a second team All American for the FCS. So in his years as a defensive coordinator, he's definitely elevated that program's defense. We do understand that he was not interviewed in a sense, but NFL coaches reached out to him for the complexity of his or not the complexity, but the effectiveness of his scheme. So he definitely seems to be a respected up and coming defensive mind in the world of football. And yeah, um, he'll be leaned on to help Shiano fill the rest of the positions that are opened on defense. But you know, we have our defensive coordinator. It seems to be a fairly decent hire at the very least. I would say like a B, B plus, that kind of area. But Arnav, you wrote the article on him. Tell us a little bit about what we're getting in what we're getting in Johansen.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. We're getting like a pretty good, not even pretty good, like a very solid hire in terms of defensive coordinator. Like you mentioned, yes, experience from like kind of lower levels of college football. Obviously, FCS level South Dakota. Before that, NIA, and AIA at Grandview, Iowa, Grandview University from Iowa, and D2 Concordia St. Paul from Minnesota, where he played college football. So he has a bit of experience. At multiple schools, kind of on the lower level. But I mean, he did pretty good. He started at at kind of coaching at the D2 level where he played at he the defensive I think quarterbacks coach and then defensive coordinator. He obviously at Grandview he became the defensive coordinator at Iowa. Oh yeah, so at D2 Concordia St. Paul's defensive backs coach and then defensive coordinator, and then Grandview, Iowa, defensive coordinator in the NAIA, which is, from my understanding, pretty comparable to D3 football, even D2, but, not in the NCAA. And then South Dakota, he took over as the defensive coordinator, eventually became the assistant head coach and the head coach at South Dakota for this past season. And although South Dakota's not a fit, like, they're not South Dakota State or North Dakota State. Like all the Dakota schools are pretty good. They've made the FCS playoffs pretty recently. Like this past season, they went 10-5. They went to the FCS quarterfinals, losing to Montana. So a pretty high level FCS team. And he was the head coach there, so he ran the operations. So pretty well versed in the FCS, and he also had a top 5 defense over there in the FCS, which is pretty high, obviously. So I mean, I think all of that's pretty promising in terms of what they're getting at Rutgers. I mean, like I said, I mean, in terms of where this program was at defensively, I mean, the floor was kind of like where things are at, and getting someone who has this kind of experience and who has a top 5 FCS defense, I feel like he could definitely help Rutgers improve their defense, especially from where the bar was kind of set with Rob Smith and Zach Sparber. So I feel like not only is it
where's that bar? That bar is down here,
it's
my
like
friend.
it's under the ground, but not only is it better than that, but I feel like it's a legitimately like respectable hire. Like I think you said B plus, like BB plus. I think that's about right. I mean, obviously you're
get a B plus, a BB, or a BB plus in this in this late in the game. It's really you got
right,
I don't want to say
exactly.
lucky, but like man, you really pulled a
stunner right at the last minute.
I was gonna say you pulled a rabbit out of the hat, but I guess we more so pulled a coyote out of the hat,
Yeah, right. The South Dakota Coyotes. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you think of FCS, you think of like North Dakota State, you think of South Dakota State. Montana State won the championship this year, but South Dakota like wasn't that far off. I mean, there were, all the Dakota schools have been pretty good. South Dakota's been, pretty competitive up there, and having a top 5 defense in that league. I mean, I think that says a lot about the type of program that, or the type of leader that you're gonna be you're gonna be getting in terms of your hire here. So like at this point in the stage, like all the top candidates are out, all the assistant coaches are out. Like we're thinking about Ola Adams, we're thinking about NFL guys. Like so to be able to pull something off like this is just really incredible. Yeah, I mean, that means your Rutgers still had some pull, like I was saying yesterday, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to like come in and take, Rutgers? Why wouldn't you want to help them restore themselves? And obviously he's been at the lower level. He's been at the NIAIA. He's been at D2. He's been at FCS. And I guess this is his opportunity to break in the big time league, in the Big Ten. So I mean, obviously, yeah, so I'm seeing from NJ.com's articles that South Dakota had a top 10 scoring defense and top 20 rushing defense in FCS football. So I mean, again, those are good marks. Top 5 overall, and compared to where Rutgers was at, I mean, they conceded 31.8 points a game. 432.8 total yards a game, both near the bottom of FBS. They conceded over 200 rushing yards a game, 131st, 222.9 yards through the air, which is 73rd, which is basically why they ended up going 5-7. I mean, multiple of those games they could have won because of their defense. And I think the stat that really stands out the most is that they conceded 7.6 yards per play, 7.92 in Big Ten play, which is, like the highest in, in Big Ten history, basically, or at least a century and possibly in Big Ten history. So obviously when you compare that to a top 10 scoring defense, top 20 rushing defense, top 5 FCS defense, yeah, it's the FCS, right? But he's coaching players who, on their level are very good, right? Or
And keep in mind, Joe Harrisimiak was an FCS head coach before he became the defensive coordinator at Rutgers, and people will say that he was a great hire.
Oh yeah, he was like,
Yeah.
the dark side defense. That was all him,
Mhm.
right? I mean, so yeah, no, like FCS, like obviously, like I have a lot of respect for the lower levels of college football, especially FCS. I mean, they're some of their top programs could probably beat a lot of some of the FBS teams even, and it's always fun to see that comparison because oftentimes it's like the top FCS teams might fall short or they might not, but they're obviously like very good teams, and in that level he was able to coach. When you're talking about coaching, you're talking about having a top level FCS defense. I mean, those are things that could definitely transfer a level up. I mean, now you're
Oh,
coaching
absolutely,
players at a higher
especially
level, right? I mean, so that those things can transfer. These guys are are FBS players, Big Ten players. I mean, those things can absolutely transfer to a level
yeah,
up.
we have seen that. Like Rutgers fans overall should be the most familiar with any of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers fans overall should be the most familiar with seeing FCS players and talent come here and ball out. You want to talk about we've had wide receivers from the FCS in the past.
Yeah,
We've had
Dymere Miller, for
yeah,
example.
Dymere Miller. We've had obviously Joe Harrisimiak, like I just mentioned. We've had players come up from the FCS, and Jaquay Jackson, I'm pretty sure, was an
Yeah, he
FCS
was, I think,
player.
FCS or D2. Like he came up.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was D2. Yeah, exactly, right. And this year we're in
Mashoud
the second.
Giwa.
Right, coming from the
Yeah.
FCS. So like these guys can ball. And now we're gonna see on the defensive side of the football with their, the Bradley Jones and Zamir Dawood coming in at
Hmm.
corner on the FCS side. So that we haven't quite seen. But I feel like I'm relatively confident in their abilities as well. We'll see how that transfers up. But at the receiver positions definitely worked out. So I have some optimism. And yeah, like I said, I mean, it's a, FCS and everything, but a very good FCS team. And, their defense was among the top in the FCS. And I think those are definitely things that can transfer up to this higher level of football in the FBS. And considering where the bar is at, I mean, like, it's obviously, compared to that, it's a bit
Underground.
better. But at the same time, I think it's also just a good hire in general that, he can, he has that track record and everything. And I think, this is what the program needs. It took a while, but I don't know. I kind of had a feeling that, something was going to work out, that they're going to be able to find somebody. And it's been
Honestly, I want to say that I agree with you and that I had that feeling too. But with each passing day in February, my feeling got worse and worse and worse. But I am really glad that Shiano went for an out of the box hire. Now we have somebody that can challenge Shiano, challenge his beliefs, and challenge his thinking in order to, how do I put it? You know, if you have two very smart men on defense and they challenge each other, they're what they come up with in the end is going to be the best of their two minds put together, you know? So again, it's going to be another. I'm just really glad that Shiano doesn't have to be the defensive coordinator because now he has the opportunity to focus on other tasks. He's going to be obviously have his hands in all the different cookie jars. He's going to, be helping out with NIL. He's obviously going to be helping out with defense. He can help out with recruiting, and him being defensive coordinator stops his ability from being able to do all that stuff. Stops him his ability to help out in all the different areas. So I am really glad that that's not going to be the case at least anymore.
Yeah, no, certainly. Because if we're looking at Greg Schiano being like a CEO type role versus a
Well,
defensive
that's what we
coordinator,
want because in this day and age, I feel like that's what you need almost because
you need a CEO type coach, right? Like not a.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
true. Because there's so much with NIL, there's so much with recruiting, there's so much with, like managing the whole team. You cannot, you know what I mean? Like to have your whole attention on the defense on top of those things. I mean, that would just be very, extremely difficult, right? And having someone focusing on the defense. So obviously, Greg Schiano's a defensive coach. He's going to have his input. I'm sure he's going to work with Johansen, but obviously, you want to have someone, running the defense, calling the plays. Like, you don't want to have to be doing that on top of recruiting, on top of game plan, on top of like interviews, on top of like NIL deals and things like that, right? There's just a lot going on. Like to manage the whole team, you know what I mean, versus managing on top of that, putting defensive play calling responsibilities on your back. I mean, that's just not an ideal situation. So obviously, you want to have someone, and he has experience. Another defensive coach who became a head coach, but obviously someone who can manage a very good defense. And compared to what we had, obviously, I think that's going to go a long way in terms of making this football team better, right? I mean, obviously we saw the offensive side of the
Absolutely.
ball last year and how well they did, and we saw where the defensive side was at, and having someone else, a different perspective come into the program, and I think that could do wonders in terms of helping turn this unit around.
And we have seen Schiano target these former head coaches, now defensive coordinator specialties, to be his defensive coordinator. It's again the same thing with Harris Simiak. This is almost like a Harris Simiak hire 2.0. Hopefully, he is just as successful as Harris Simiak was for Rutgers. But that's what it honestly seems like. It honestly just seems like they hired Joe Harris Simiak again. You know,
Yeah.
am I wrong to believe that? Am I wrong to say that?
I mean, not really, right? Like you said, like a guy he was also from the FCS. Like I think he coached in Maine, who was also another one of those higher end FCS teams, made the playoffs. Right, and then he came to
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers. He did his job, and he did really well. For us. So like, yeah, I mean, I definitely do see the similarities in him and Harris Simiak. I could definitely
Yeah.
see that happening again, and obviously pair him with Kirk Chiraka on the other side of the football, and like who's really done wonders with Cali Man is bringing him in and developing him into who this offense needs, and now you have someone on the defensive side, and um, someone who's worked his way up, who's been in multiple levels of college football. Whether it's D2, whether it's NIA, or whether it's South Dakota, going from the defensive coordinator, head coach, having a very solid defense the whole, especially this past season and the whole while, and having a playoff team in there, one of the better units for their level, and you know what I mean. Now, how you have better athletes to work with, now you're also gonna have better competition, but a lot of those schemes and a lot of those that kind of stuff, as a coach, I mean, you have better,
If you
you
know
know what I
what you're
mean.
doing, you know what you're doing. You
Yeah,
know.
right. Because like that, South Dakota, like one of the better FCS units. Now, obviously, talent level isn't the same, but as the Big Ten. But now you're inheriting, kind of better athletes who are supposed to be able to compete in the Big Ten level. You're also gonna have better competition, but schemes at the end of the day are schemes. You're gonna be teaching these athletes schemes, and you're gonna be teaching them concepts that they can apply, right? And as long as they have that, like that's really what's important at the end of the day. And if he can help restore Rutgers to their defensive prowess where they where they were, and maybe teach them some new things. Maybe Schiano was saying things like he's not married to a particular scheme, and he's open to an extent. Obviously he's not going to change everything. Like I'm sure he wants to run like a his usual 4-2-5 on defense. He's kind of somewhat set in his ways, but he also has an open mind to picking
Now, see,
different
that's a
things,
little
right?
bit interesting though, because I read somewhere that Johansson actually likes to run three linebackers.
Three
So
lines.
maybe Shiano is very high on the young linebackers coming up and could be willing to adjust his schemes. We don't know exactly, but it's going to be interesting to see, and it's going to be a change of pace because I think we just needed that. Sometimes you need to bring in fresh, creative ideas to keep yourself on the cutting edge of college football. And I feel like this is going to help out a lot. I don't know exactly how much he was getting paid as to be the FCS head coach of South Dakota. So it's definitely a bump up in pay for him. That should be enough to keep him around at least for a little while. Just not guarantee that he's going to move on immediately. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm really hopeful about this hire. It seems really good. We just need to go out and see it on the field now and see what he does to assist this program, even though it's very late in the offseason.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's late in the off season. But they definitely got they got themselves a guy. I mean, that's very interesting what you said about 4-3-4 versus 4-2-5. Like, it seems like, yeah, like he was saying, like he's not married to a scheme or an idea. Obviously, he's kind of set in his ways and he's difficult to work with, like according to a lot of people. But he's not 100% set in like I'm gonna run the defense. He obviously wanted someone else to run it, and I think he's open to learning different things and having someone run the unit as long as he's familiar with it and he has some say. But I think he wants someone to be able to have that control over the unit. So we'll see if he's high on those linebackers. I know the one from Rice is supposed to be very pretty good. I mean,
Yeah, but
they
you
have
got to
other
think about the
guys.
guys coming up too, like DJ
Exactly.
McClary, Kamar
Yeah,
Archie.
I was about to mention, and on top of that, the transfer from Rice, and maybe we see some realignment in terms of the scheme and everything. You have cornerbacks in there, you have safeties. I mean, we'll see what happens. But I mean, I think it's a very strong hire. At this point in the game for the Scarlet Knights, and I'm looking forward to seeing it for sure.
Well, I said it once earlier in the podcast, and I'll say it again. It seems like we pulled a coyote out of our hat a little bit. Um, not to reference the FCS team, but um, again, I just don't know if they could have made a better hire very this late in the process. So I am, from what we know about it, seems like a good hire. This offseason for a while there felt like how could this get any worse? Like
Right.
the the defensive additions in the transfer portal were underwhelming. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be bad; they were just underwhelming. Um,
Yeah, I agree with
the
you.
There was a lot of worry surrounding the who was going to leave the program, and then the defensive coordinator search dragged on for a while. But now that this is done, it's over. We have our guy. It seems like nothing has been signed yet. Just wanted to point that out. Nothing has been signed yet. There has to be like a whole thing with the board of governors and whatnot.
Yeah,
They have to
official
like call a
meeting.
meeting to hire
Yeah.
and just all that nice
Right.
bureaucratic stuff. But so that has to be conducted. They still need to do all that, but it sounds like he has verbally agreed to the position. Or
That's what it sounds like, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a whole bunch of bureaucratic nonsense that I wish I had a better understanding of, and that's the best way to put it. Nonsense. I'm pretty sure I let my opinions be known
Yeah, it's
about
like
the position
formalities. Like they have to
before.
have a governor's meeting. They have to make the hire official. He has to sign the
Yep,
contract. Obviously, like things like that like have to happen. But in terms of like whether it's targeting versus official, like it seems like now it's basically gonna happen. At this point, they just got to work through those formalities. But yeah, no, it's relieving, right? Like to have a defensive coordinator hired at this, or set to be hired at this stage in time. Obviously, it's very late, but you want to have someone good at the end of the day, right? You don't want to just hire anyone.
exactly.
Although, right, although anyone probably would be good, better than who we had, but at the same time, like in terms of right, but you don't want to just settle for anybody just because it's
Ask
different, right? You
Madden would
want
have
to get
been better
someone.
than what we had.
Right, yeah, you could probably have, just a random person who doesn't even know about football, like, what I mean? Not, probably not, but like, you know what I mean? You could probably hire so
Yeah,
many people, but at the same time, you wanna get someone who's not only better, but you wanna have someone good and also someone who has fresh ideas. And I'm glad. I mean, I'm not glad. Like, it would have been nice to obviously have someone from the Power Four level, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, getting whoever can coach, right? So I mean, it's very different from probably what Shiano's used to, and as someone who watches like the FCS playoffs and stuff like that. I mean, I just saw John Catapano who writes for the site and comments pretty frequently. He said he's a big FCS fan, Montana and Montana State in particular. He says he loves this hire. It's very Anciano like, out of the box, and I have to agree with that. He excels at recruiting, coaching players, and as someone who loves the FCS and loves, watching the playoffs in particular over there, and who enjoys the comparisons between FCS and FBS, like someone who follows that sport, that level of the game, at least to a certain extent, I do like that Shiano didn't just, limit himself to only Power Four. I'm glad that he looked beyond, the Grail, and that was probably necessary because of where the search was at. But I'm glad he did it, and I think he definitely pulled, like you said, like a coyote out of the hat. He got someone who's capable. He got someone who's good. He didn't stop at the FBS level, and he found someone that I think can bring his skill set from the FCS up to the FBS and bring fresh ideas to this defense, because I think that's really what was needed.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that last sentence there. We definitely needed some fresh ideas. Um, we really don't have much else to talk about on the podcast here today. We just wanted to do it in a kind of like a breaking news podcast, or the best way that we could do it, breaking news 2 hours after the fact. But
Yes, sir. Yeah.
we really appreciate you guys listening. For major events, we plan to do more breaking news podcasts such as this one. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, sticking with us for another 25 minutes. Give us a 5-star on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really does help us out, and it really does help grow what we're trying to do here. Also, I lost my momentum there.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what this new defensive coordinator does for Rutgers. And as a message to him, good luck in his future career on the banks. You know, with Shiano, he's probably going to need it. And to him, to everybody else,
Right.
always remember that the bells must ring.